So we're back inside of our open shade, and what we want to do today is actually talk about creating DIY backgrounds, because you know the foliage is pretty, but it's also pretty distracting, right? I mean, at the beginning of the week we talked about simplicity, and one of the things that we can do in simplicity is to choose a less complicated background. And so this background is pretty complicated, right? There's lots of little things going on that draw our attention away. Now, if it was more of like an environmental portrait, that might make sense. Maybe it says something about the subject, or it helps give us context. But when we're talking about simplicity and we looked at the work of Richard Avedon, what we really want is a clean background as much as possible. So we're going to look at a couple of options of ways of just building a really quick background. Now, we saw how Richard Avedon did it, which he just taped it straight to the wall, right? So if you have that as an option, by all means, go ahead, just tape it straight up. Obviously, be careful about what wall you're putting it on, so it's not going to tear off paint and those sort of things. But if it's an outside wall, you probably could do that. Now, another thing is that it's important is that we're going to be doing these DIY backgrounds in the open shade, and also, you could also use it for window lighting. So one of those two ways. So the reason for that is because we'll probably be using something like a sheet or fabric or something like that, and so we don't want light to transmit through there. Unless you're really trying to like let it blow out or something like that, and it's completely illuminated and it's going to glow, then that might be able to work too. But we need it to be an open shade so that the front of the fabric is being lit and not necessarily going to have light coming through it, because that's going to kind of ruin our effect. So it needs to be in the shade, or if it's window light, it needs to be not in front of the window, but behind the subject as the subject's facing towards the window. So let's look at a couple of options of how to go about rigging up a background. Sorry, I feel like we're in a construction zone today with our jackhammering and mowing and everything else, but we've got to just kind of move on, so hopefully it's going to be okay. So to start with, I'm just going to use the thing that I think will be the lowest common denominator. So this is just a white sheet, and I figure pretty much everybody should have access to a white sheet, or even if it's a yellow sheet or something like that, something kind of in a light color. So we're going to use this to start with. And the thing about it though, it was just kind of out in the garage, and so it's pretty wrinkly. So we should take maybe just a couple of minutes and go ahead and iron out those wrinkles, so that it's not going to show all of that texture and patterning as much as we can. So we're just going to iron it just super quick. All right, there we go. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's kind of been my mantra lately, but it'll significantly, minimize some of those wrinkles so that we don't have such a jumbly mess in the background. And I'm gonna go ahead and leave this plugged in, because sometimes, as it's hanging, we might want to just hit a couple of spots. Maybe add some extra water so it can work as a steamer. Use whatever you have. If you need to just spray bottle it and allow the wrinkles to come out that way, whatever you have to do, but try to minimize those wrinkles. All right, so to start with, I'm just going to use some clothespins and use that to just attach it, since there are bushes that they can maybe be able to hold on to that, just to keep it in place. All right, so we've got kind of the background hung. Let's take a really quick look, kind of change our position and see how it's going to work. All right, so now I'm in front of my background. Couple of things, I rotated the camera just so that, it would be closer to like a portrait mode. Now, if I'm using a white background, the way the camera averages things, when it sees a lot of white, it wants to average to gray. So notice like the background's a little bit dark. So you could always play with the exposure. I'm going to touch and lock it. And, if I wanted that background to be a little bit brighter, I could bring it up and, and blow out that exposure. I don't want to obviously blow out the skin tones though. So, it's going to be kind of a balance. And so just adjust, but do be conscious of your exposure. We talked about exposure a long time ago. There's always things that I could maybe do later, like maybe inside of Snapseed, and adjust and brighten up just those whitest areas, even, mask it, those sort of things. But at least we know we've got a fairly simple background. It's going to be, a little bit more, uniform, as opposed to the distractions that were back in there. Now, because the light is soft and even in there, we're not getting really harsh shadows. You notice if I just pan up a little bit, you can see like lights coming through that fabric, which in this case might be, too bright. So something like that can work, and then we're in open shade, so you could use the fill cards if you wanted to. If you want to just go in just regular old open shade, that should work okay too. So that's kind of a quick, simple way. And let's look at an alternative version. So what if there's no super convenient place to actually attach it to, to hang it from? Let's look at an alternative if we don't have like a bush to clip it to. So I'm just gonna try using a ladder and maybe put a stick through here and then hang it off of that. So let's see how that works. All right, so I went and grabbed a stick. Now we collect sticks, so you may not have a stick like this, but it could be a, like a broom handle or a 2x4, or, it could be anything. It just needs to be something that's kind of long enough to go through there. And so I'm just gonna run this. There we go. That way we've got kind of a long part, and then again we can use our clips to kind of clip it onto there. So this time it's going to be too big to just directly attach it, so we'll loop it over and clip it to itself. So I'm just looping it over there, and then I'm just going to attach these two parts there. Okay, there we go. So now we've got our DIY background attached there. Let's take a look at what it looks like when we're going to go to shoot. All right, so here's our next location. And again, now we've got just a white clean sheet again. Just a different way of hanging it up. And, again, we're in open shade, the light's soft and even. We can start to move around. If we wanted to do something, a lot of times photographers like Annie Leibovitz or even Irving Penn sometimes will include part of the set. So if you wanted to, even with this, you could kind of back it out of there, get a portion of that set along with it, if you wanted more of a full body, but the main subject here is going to be within that area. It'll have that kind of a feeling. You can pose them, do things, but then it'll also have some of that context of where they are, so you can experiment with that as well. Or just bring it in, or just bring it in tight so that you've got just a nice clean background. Again, think about body position. Doesn't always have to be square to the camera. It's okay to turn to the side a little bit and have, a little bit over the shoulder, do stuff with hands, just experiment with your model, because the light's going to be really soft and flattering no matter where you go. So one last one really quick. I know we talked about, keeping it in the shade. If you do want to attempt to do something with backlighting instead, you can try this option. So we always have, we have our trailer kind of turned around so we can kind of access it a little more easily, and kind of a sheet here that usually stays there just to kind of, we can keep the garage open and other things, and make it a little more private. And, right now it's the time of the day where the light's coming through there. So that might allow that to, be a little bit brighter instead of it being lit, in the front, and give it kind of some backlighting. It might have too much texture. A thin sheet might work better, but let's take a quick look and see what that effect looks like. So here I am in front of that curtain, and you can see it's pretty much blowing out, which is good, although it does have a little bit of a texture and things in there. We could try and see, if I boom, the exposure, and I could up the exposure. If I bring it up high enough, it almost completely disappears. Now, we want to be careful that we're not completely blowing out the skin tone and making that too bright, but, it could work in that direction as well. Just going ahead and using you know, a little bit of extra exposure, allowing that to kind of blow through. And this is a canvas, so it's a little bit thicker. So if you're using a thinner sheet, it might blow out even faster. You know, you could use an alternative version to hang something like that up. You know, maybe like, you know, 2 ladders or 2 people even could hold it for you, you know, in order to create that background. But the main idea is really just to be inventive, try different things. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, like I've been saying, you know, just, you know, but do what you can to try to minimize things. You know, take a little bit of time, get out the wrinkles, even if it's just with the spray bottle. Clip it up and try to get it, you know, as clean as possible, unless you're looking for, you know, kind of wavy, you know, folds and things like that. Photographers have used those over the centuries as well, just like painters. So just be inventive, try something, get something, you know, set up so that you're getting a nice clean background, you know, some alternative version of, you know, of the simplicity background in the style of Richard Avedon or Irving Penn. And let's see, maybe if we can even come around this way a little bit, you know, that way we're getting a nice bright background, and, you know, we can change the lighting a little bit and change our angle like we were talking about. So anyway, looking forward to see what you guys make.